On June 18, 1990, a 42-year-old Jacksonville man walked into the offices of General Motors Acceptance Corporation in Deerwood Center Office Park and shot 13 employees and customers, killing 8 and wounding 5 others before turning the gun on himself. One of the wounded died days later, bringing the number of victims killed to 9. It was an alarming and horrific tragedy that I heard about on the radio and saw on television as I was kicking off my last summer vacation before high school. The killer lived in this apartment building on 22nd Street. He exacted his revenge over the repossession of a car, a 1988 Pontiac Trans Am, and blood was spilled in Baymeadows. Let us never forget the victims. I never forgot it. It would be just one of many I would see news coverage of on television throughout my life. The Baymeadows way that I came to know in the 1990s was heavy traffic amidst the tranquil office parks, the ebbs and flows of the morning rush, lunchtime and rush hour and nighttime, the theater and restaurants everywhere on Baymeadows Road, right off US 1, Phillips Highway, and I-95 was where everything was. Back then, you could go to a Wendy's fast food restaurant with your family for your favorite hamburger, then cool your heels browsing at a bookstore while you waited for your movie time. The suburbs were booming. The Avenues Mall at US 1 opened in 1990, and I would admire it in rambling, aimless walks up and down the mall, both floors. In Jacksonville in 1990, there were 2 different worlds. Hi everyone, I'm George Farrar. Welcome to Jax 90. Jacksonville as it was in the year 1990. As a kid in Mandarin, I would see the inner city of Jacksonville in particularly raw ways. I was bussed in from Mandarin to be schooled at R.V. Daniels and Matthew Gilbert in Jacksonville's inner city. It was part of the federal racial integration mandate that Duval County had. The school bus rides were long and hot or cold depending on the day. I remember the day that cops were patrolling outside Matthew Gilbert as I caught the bus home. There was something going on about the Miami Boys, a street gang at that time. The buses took us to school through neighborhoods that had seen better days. This was amidst the crack epidemic. If I wasn't reading my social studies books or running my mouth, I was trying to make sense of what I was seeing outside the window. By 1990, I was coming to terms at the age of 15 with the fact that I had been born into a somewhat fortunate life, while others clearly had not. And that bothered me. It shaped my view of things which would in turn shape my future. We began our show with an account of violent, bloody crimes. Now is the point where we talk about the crimes of urban neglect and poverty. These crimes that are endless, and we have seen in the past, can see in the present, and will see ahead in cities all over our nation. From time to time, leaders work to fight those crimes, but it's an uphill struggle. There were people all over in 1990 who were struggling to make ends meet. Not everyone was getting their piece of the pie. Prices were rising. Gas prices were of concern. Troops were mobilizing for a war in the Middle East that would happen in 1991. The President of the United States of America was George Herbert Walker Bush, a Republican. The governor of the state of Florida was Bob Martinez, a Republican. The mayor of Jacksonville, the city of Jacksonville, was Tommy Azzurri, a Democrat. Earlier in our series, I talked about the decline of the downtown retail spaces and the rise of the malls. With less business downtown, despite the landing and the riverfront, fewer and fewer people in the 1990s would have reasons to be downtown as much, as more and more work went out to the office parks and centers in Baymeadows and the South Side. Not that there wasn't anything going on. In 1989, Barnett Bank, a big bank at the time, announced the construction of a skyscraper downtown, now currently known in 2021 as the Bank of America Tower. In 1990, construction was completed, and it became Jacksonville's tallest building. But the skyscrapers aside, both the mayor and the sheriff, like their counterparts throughout the nation, had their hands full with the crack epidemic and the problems of the city. Crime, pollution from the companies that still fought to pump filth and dangerous chemicals into the air, traffic, urban blight, you name it, Jacksonville had it. These problems are bigger than people. These problems can take on a life of their own when they're not addressed effectively. When I reflect on these years, I get the feeling that the mayor and the sheriff got left holding the bag. Through our series, I've talked about the highs and lows of the city. There were problems in the city that just compounded and compounded day after day. It would take fresh ideas and vision to spur change. A case in point, the crumbling of the Blodgett Homes Housing Project, a federal housing project. At some point, it was determined that it had to go, and it became a city priority to develop the land and find better housing options for the people who lived there. Ironically, it was named after a wealthy African-American Jacksonville architect and real estate developer, Joseph Blodgett, who was one of the richest African-Americans in early 20th century Florida. Opened in the 1940s, Blodgett Homes began to experience the same types of problems that federal housing projects had all over the nation. The construction of Interstate 95 in the late 1950s and 1960s, adjoining the project, destroyed the quality of life for the residents there, who were predominantly African American in the years that I knew of it. There was a WTLV TV news report in the 1970s detailing the problems then at Blodgett. In the 1980s, I would get an eyeful as I looked out the window of my family car, waiting in traffic to get on I-95, and saw the absolute despair and poverty. I'll never forget what I saw. We see some of the talk of the town in these 1990 Ed Gamble political cartoons. Here we see Mayor Hazuri with a toy wagon hauling a big chest of campaign funds, cash, and you can see that there looks like two business people, and one of them says, for someone who doesn't like fat cats, he sure doesn't mind us feeding his kitty. So, of course, Mayor Hazuri had an eye towards re-election, and he was collecting money, doing fundraising like all politicians do. And it takes a long time to get a campaign really going effectively to get the kinds of cash that you would need for television, radio ads, things like that, to really get out there and get your message out to get a second term. So in 1990, people were already talking about it. And so that is something to keep in mind. What will happen in 1991? Let's stay tuned. Here we see Mayor Hazuri standing next to a heavy guy, and on this shirt it says budget. Okay, so we're talking about the city budget, and Mayor Hazuri is saying, I call him my mean, lean running machine. Well, you know, to really run the government, right, and to try to solve a lot of the problems that the city had, was it taking increasing amounts of money, of course. And the population was going up. Over 600,000 people were going to be counted in the 1990 census. So with all of that, right, there's a lot of services that have to be provided because they're demanded. But as I was talking about earlier, the suburbs were booming. Values were going up. Property values were going up. And so people paid that had owned property in Duval County were responsible to pay property taxes, which were assessed based, in some cases, on higher property values. And at the time, there would be greater swings. There weren't the kinds of state constitutional protections that we know today. So there might be greater swings in what would be due from year to year. And that would hit people sometimes somewhat hard. So then, I don't know a lot about park fees, but I do know there was a lot of talk, and I can remember this, talk about the garbage fee. It's called the trash tax here, but the nomenclature I remember it was the garbage fee. And, you know, who likes to take out the garbage? But on garbage night in 1990, guess whose responsibility it was, right? Me. So when you heard someone talk, well, they're making such a big ruckus over garbage, and make a big ruckus about garbage because with an increased population, you had to deal with increased amounts of garbage, the landfills, all the things that were involved with that. And increasingly, they were trying to find revenue sources. And, in a time when Governor Martinez ran into a lot of trouble trying to propose a services tax, and then Mayor Zuri's proposing a garbage fee. So it was not a good time for politicians who were trying to do that. And this also being in the age of read my lips, no new taxes. I got quite a laugh on this cartoon here. School attendance plan number 27467. Children go to school half day in inner city and half day in suburbs without having to leave bus. And we see a schoolhouse attached to a school bus. And I got quite a laugh on this because back in the 1980s, as you heard earlier here on the show, I was part of that, taking the bus from way out in Mandarin all the way into the inner city of Jacksonville. And that happened for two schools, 6th grade and 7th grade. And finally, of course, I made it to DuPont for the 8th grade. And after that, I was more in the general area of where I lived. But it was quite difficult. There were times that I wanted to go to socials, things like that. Couldn't do it, right? I'd get stuck on this bus, as I talked about earlier, where if it was hot and humid, the windows steamed up. If it was cold, you want to make sure you had your jacket. Very little fresh air. I personally think it was an incredibly unhealthy process. And there were you would find there were some mental issues, and I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but I knew of at least a couple bus drivers that just snapped, cracked, and a couple little scenarios and incidents that you shouldn't have had to deal with. It's easier to deal with something, hang around right outside the school doors than it is to handle on Interstate 95 or Hendricks Avenue or wherever you might be. On a bus, there was a lot of difficulty with it, and it goes to show that sometimes there can be a heavy hand upon things, and it can impact your life. And you live in the world under which you're governed. And it's good, though, as we go through these, and we've gone through these cartoons and these political views through this series, that we can say that we do live in a nation where we can certainly bring these items up. And clearly, down the road, things changed. And I'm happy for the people that had a more efficient way of getting their education at such critical ages. Incidentally, back in 6th grade, some kid snapped at me and threw my glasses out the window. So, pretty wild stuff. I can tell some stories. Okay, all right, so let's talk about Nirvana. In May of 1990, a Seattle grunge band named Nirvana visited Jacksonville and performed at the Einstein A-Go-Go. Now, of course, I never made it to the show. I never ever made it to Einstein A-Go-Go. In fact, I wouldn't find out about Nirvana until 1991, when in my living room at my home on the west side, I would for the first time see their music video. And that was how you reached people when it came to music. That was how you really reached the mass public, was music videos on MTV. The first time I saw Smells Like Teen Spirit. And at this unique moment, that was when, I think, the 1990s came into being. Decades are distinguished in differences, not just by political, economic events, but also social and cultural ones. And they were different. And they performed in Jacksonville in May of 1990. I would know them later, and I would consider them my favorite band coming of age in the 1990s. And whoever saw that show in May of 90 has a special experience that's enriched their life, because they saw them before the fame really took off. And that had to have been something Really, really special. Ironically, I had the good fortune through a big decision that my father made that had ripples throughout my life from 1989 forward, like throwing a pebble into a pond. My father bought a huge 3-bedroom house overlooking a pond on the west side of Jacksonville. So, after the snow melted in December of 1989, we moved in. In the early days of January 1990, I changed schools yet again, from Jeb Stuart Junior High to Jeff Davis Junior High. Then, my life accelerated as I entered Forest High School, Nathan Bedford Forest High School, now known as Westside High, in the fall of 1990 as a 10th grader. I was trying to look serious and determined in this picture. I had a lot to learn. At Forest High School, I would find the stability, the friendships, and the knowledge that I'd long dreamt of for years. My half-brother John was being raised by my stepmother, and my father was raising me while working at Channel 4. I wouldn't see John for a couple years, and I had to come to terms with that. I had my friends, my school, my father, grandmother, and family, aunts and uncles, but I would never be the brother I had dreamt of all those years watching those old Brady Bunch TV shows. Life is bittersweet, but in the coming years, great things were coming for Jacksonville and myself, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. And so that's it, Jackson 90. I greatly appreciate your viewership of the series over the years. Stay tuned to this channel for coming episodes spanning 1991 through 1995. I expect to broadcast Jackson 91 before the end of 2021 and to complete our series with Jackson 95, broadcasting no later than June 15th, 2022. We're on Facebook groups at History Jacksonville, where there's even more Jacksonville history to enjoy. Pictures, films, recollections, memories, thoughts. Please check out theleftturnetwork.com for all my shows, and please check out this channel. Please consider subscribing. Tell your friends, and tell your enemies too. I want to thank you for watching. Take it easy. See you later.